Welcome to Old Speak Extra with Luke Izaak. Today I have, this evening, wow, it's been a long few weeks. I have Pete Chandler from the top end. How's it going all over the other side there, Pete?
Well, it's not really the other side, Luke. I mean, we see Queenslanders as cousins, and a little bit slower than what we are, but but cousins all the same, and we support each other.
Well, it's funny, when I moved from Victoria, it was literally like stepping back into the 1980s coming to Queensland culturally. You know, I mean, things closed at 5 p.m. Nothing was open to midnight except, on the coast.
And we've got Joby Elkie-Peterson to thank us.
Yeah.
Thank everyone for that.
But I love that. But there's a similar phenomena I hear that happens in the Northern Territory as well. And I mean, you having been heavily involved politically, socially at every level, from council to the CLP to the social work that you do with the food bank and everything. I mean, you would have seen everything. Would it be like stepping back into the 70s there? Is that true? Is that correct?
That's a pretty low blow. That's a pretty fair.
Well, I know
low blow.
Technologically, militarily, you basically have all the power.
Yes.
But in terms of culture, culturally,
and it's such a diverse place. I mean, look, the honest truth is, I come to the Northern Territory in 1985. In fact, in 1988, you were there, Luke. You were there in 1988, and I can recall your mum picking a cat food off the floor because she was worried that you were eating the cat food.
This was a bad idea.
And that was in 1988. So a few years back. And to be honest, I didn't like the Territory when I first come here because I didn't know anyone. My family was down south. You, part of my family. I mean, and the fact is that when you don't know anybody, you don't feel connected to the community. And then, of course, you get involved in sport, you get involved in other things, and you become connected to the community. And here we are 35 years later, and I'm still here. So still there. And with no real reason or want to leave this place, albeit, there's been a change of government, things have slowed down, and I think it's time that the current government makes some big decisions and get the Territory back on track. There's so much opportunity up here, so much opportunity. It just needs vision and leadership, and hopefully that will occur.
Yeah, look, the thing is, Territory politics is so different to. I mean, we have a similar situation with our houses here in Queensland, but being a territory. Constitutionally, you exist under another subset of rules. Again, for those, I know you a little bit, but for those in the audience who don't know you, can you just give a 60-second brief as to the last 35 years in the Territory?
No.
Okay, you can take up to 3 minutes.
Right. Okay. Now you're talking. Now, look, I was a member of the Air Force. I was a police dog handler. First moved to the Territory in 1985. I played rugby league, and that's how I got a connection to the community because you join a civilian club. I met the woman of my dreams. She looked very Greek to me, and Greeks had money in the Territory, so I thought I was on the right moves. But of course, she wasn't Greek, Welsh background, but in fact Welsh Canadian. But anyway, the looks were there. But the truth is that you become
like
part
every wonderful woman, she knows how to spend money. That's right.
Absolutely, and that's my reason for being broke all these years. We decided to put down our roots here. We built our first home in the Territory, moved forward 4 kids later, aging from 25, 21, 18 and 8, a big spread of children. But getting involved as a former Justice of the Peace, as a chairperson of a local primary school, you really become part of your community. And it was through frustration as chair of a local primary school with the then government that I didn't think there was anywhere near enough being done for education. And this wasn't about money. This was about how that money was being spent. And so I end up getting involved in politics. And strangely enough, I as a former, section councillor for the CPSU, I was a member of the ASU. People obviously thought that I was, if you like, left inclined. Where I think that I'm very much like most Australians, middle of the road.
Yeah.
I have both left views, I have right views, and it's based on what the issue that we're talking about. I'm not wedded to a side of politics. I'm wedded to who I am and what I was brought up to believe in. And so those views can be very left and they can be very right, depending on the issue that you're talking about. But I end up in a conservative political movement, the Country Liberal Party. It's whilst it's a conservative party, it's not part of the Liberal Party, nor is it part of the National Party. It is an independent party. Very much stands up for territorial rights. And when I read the Constitution, after sitting in Terry Mills' office one afternoon, it very much described who I was. This is about standing up for the territory, standing up for people and doing what's right for the territory. So I joined the party, moved forward. You end up getting elected as a member of that party, and then 4 years later on from that, we end up in government. For those people that don't know me, I have been the Deputy Chief Minister. I've been the Minister for Police, Fire and Emergency Services, Education, Housing, Trade, Business, goodness gracious, infrastructure and transport. So there's been quite a large portfolio in that time. Have I learned a lot? Absolutely. Do I think that I have a future in politics? Yes, I do. Now, no. But sometime in the future, yes, because I think of all that learning, all those networks that I've, if you like, come across, and the knowledge of how government works. It would be such a waste not to use that knowledge and to try to benefit the territory sometime in the future.
It's interesting that you say that, because I mean, again, that is such a non-political answer. You know, if you're asked if you're going to stand for politics, you give a non-answer. That's or
a lot of media
that you're not interested. Yeah, but one of the things, and I say this objectively because I've, as you know, we've agreed and disagreed on many things, but to look to the media, as you know, that's where I came up from. That's where I did my education. Though better known for music for a lot of that time. Journalism has always been to me about holding truth to power. And
but what's truth, Luke?
What is truth? What do you call you?
Pilot. And look,
pilot.
Yeah,
One thing,
look,
I was actually
I
going to
could tell
compliment you, but I could actually backslap you instead. What I was going to say is that you have always been a man of principle, regardless of what you disagree, regardless of whether or not I agree with you on a specific political issue. You were always somebody who did something out of principle, and that became very apparent during the, I won't name him. No, I will. You don't have to. During the end of the Giles era in the CLP, where NT News and all of the every publication, Channel 7, everybody was just laying bare the shambolic nature, and to use an Abbott phrase, of territory politics and where it had sort of got to at that point. I couldn't find even a left-leaning journalist who wanted to take a knife to your back. You know, they may have done it publicly for the publication, but the amount of respect that was garnered by you and your constituency was something to behold, in the light of every 5 o'clock news report having something to do with how bad the CLP had become at that time. And that was a very interesting. You had obviously stood out as a maverick. You were willing to cross party lines. You were willing to make decisions based on what you genuinely believed was right for your electorate or right for your portfolio, more so than a lot of the political party machines. And you know, it would be good to see. One thing that I watched observing you for, you know, over a decade in this game is the fearsome nature of actually many people wanting to become a politician. The having to read War and Peace or Solzhenitsyn level papers every night before making decisions on policy. You'd be up to the early hours all the time. You'd come on a family holiday and you would literally have to read Solzhenitsyn, in a sense, before you could even reply to an email. And that, as I look around a lot of the micro parties and a lot of, as a libertarian, this is hard for me to say, but I look around at a lot of micro parties and people with aspirations to enter politics. I just think you have no idea what you're asking for.
And you're absolutely right. Look, I think there's a couple of answers to the questions that you put in there. And the first one is that I took my job seriously. It is a true honour to be elected. Now, whether it's on a few thousand people or hundreds of thousands of people, and depending on the political area that you are in this country, it is an absolute privilege. So you take it seriously. Secondly, whatever you're doing, you've got to always put at the forefront your own family and the community. I never put myself first. It was always, how does this affect my family? How does it affect their friends and, of course, our community? And if you have always got that as the forefront, and that's the flag. That's the flag that keeps coming up every time whether it's someone you're meeting. And look, in politics, the reality is you meet a hell of a lot of people pushing their own barrows, all right? And you get it. And I won't say that in the first 12 months. Let's go back a step. I'm really glad we didn't win government in 2008. It gave me 4 years to do an apprenticeship in opposition, to learn the ropes and to understand. Had we taken government in 2008, I think we would have been a terrible government. Now, moving forward to 2012, I think we were, in some regards, in the public arena, we were perhaps a terrible government. The truth is, there are a lot of things that were happening behind the scenes
that were real.
If people would sit down and analyse, they would think, wow, they were not a bad government. And I know people hate figures and they hate when government talk about billions and all of this. But if you think from a government's perspective, we inherited a position in time where the government of the day was projecting a debt of $5.5 billion. In our time, in only 4 years, we had halved that to less than $2.4 billion. In one small period of time, we're actually in surplus. So you think in a 4-year period, we were able to achieve that. That's a pretty big or good example. So even journalists, and I even heard one night, Ben Smee, who was the editor at the NT News at the time, Ben, who I'd enjoyed a couple of whiskies with, him and Chris Walsh. Enemies in the paper, but behind the scenes, good enough to sit down and have a drink with and have a genuine chat with. Even those guys could not criticise the economic, if you like, credentials of the government of the day. And even though there was a lot of bad things that happened, the fact that Terry Mills had worked very hard over 4 years and had got elected as our chief minister, and 6 months, 7 months later, you've got Adam Giles who's come in and did the numbers, and all of a sudden he's the chief minister. Now, even Adam, and I admit here publicly that him and of course Dave Tollner, look, we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but being a conservative party, we shared our views. And with Dave, you know what? There was a lot of times, probably him and I argued more than any other of our team. But the man never lied to me. He would often walk into my office and he would say, Pete, you're not going to like what I am about to say, but I need to tell you. And he would tell you up front what's going on. I can't say that's the same story with many of our people, but with Dave, whilst we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things, the man never lied to me. And for a time being, that I was the Deputy Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, serving with Adam Giles. And the one thing about Adam, though, is that whilst he may not have been everyone's cup of tea, he had a whole lot of really good policies, particularly policies that were focused on improving the lives of Aboriginal people.
Mhm.
getting Aboriginal communities to work. And
Yes.
I felt that his policies really did help me as the education minister, because I thought one of our biggest problems in the territory was attendance. How do you get kids to school? How do you get them to school? And
Mm.
I worked long and hard on how to improve our education system in the territory. And had dinner and a lot of time with Noel Pearson, working with him, flying from place to place in North Queensland, places like Arakun, where I seen a particular education model that I thought this could work in the Northern Territory.
Mm.
Because I felt that if you've got all these communities in the Northern Territory and you've got all these people on welfare, how do you get kids to school if there's no carrot? How do you get kids to school if they think, well, if mum and dad don't work and if my grandparents don't work, what future have I got?
Mm.
What's the incentive to go to school if there's no future?
Yes.
And what I've seen with both Adam's policies when it come to remote education, remote opportunities. And if you look at what we were doing in Groote Island, have a look at what we were doing in the Tiwis, there was a real strong connection to the communities in empowering themselves to improve their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Not be a mendicant society, as is the Northern Territory at the moment. Always putting out your hand to federal politicians on, look at us, we are poor.
Yeah.
Look at that. What can we do to get off that? How can we benefit the rest of the country?
Mm.
And the latest thing with Michael Gunner, the Chief Minister, approving fracking in the Northern Territory, fantastic. Because what, we can be the energy providers for the rest of this country.
Mm-hmm.
We can provide the gas that's needed in Queensland, in New South Wales and Victoria and other places. There's more gas in the Northern Territory and enough gas to provide this place for 100 years, maybe more.
Oh,
that's
you have
not
so much convincing that we're not going to do on this show as to the benefits of fracking. And I know you've seen the reports, you've done the studies, and you've been very, very careful. But I also studied the other side of where fracking goes wrong. And I tell you what, I'm highly, highly suspect of some of the procedures that fracking has, and some of the long-term damage that bad fracking has done. So, yes.
But Luke, for this, there's a lot of things that happen in Queensland that have often been used by the Green movement to, if you like, muddy the waters. And I know that's a terrible term to use in this instance, but there are two differences between gas in Queensland, which is coal seam gas.
Yes.
In the Northern Territory, it is shale gas. The difference is that coal seam gas is very close to the surface. In the Northern Territory, we have shale gas, and it can be 2, 3, 4, even 5 kilometres below the surface, well lower than what groundwater or even aquifers come in. It could be a few hundred metres below the surface. And the studies that I have seen, not only here in Australia but also overseas. Now, if we've got a few, now this will take probably 1 or 2 minutes. But look, when we were in government and we were talking about fracking, now for those people that may be listening or that may listen in the future, we've been fracking in the Northern Territory for near on 50 years.
Yes.
In the Mereenie fields in Central Australia, we've been fracking gas for many, many years. Now, I can tell you that the regulations today are a lot tougher than they were 50 years ago. So we have improved things, and yet there's still yet to be an issue with the gas that was fracked in Central Australia. Around the Daly Waters area, which is probably our biggest opportunity in the Northern Territory.
Yes.
We are talking gas that's 3, 4 and 5 kilometres below the surface. Now, well out of the way of water aquifers, well out of the way of the water table, anything like that. Now, look, the truth is that can you mitigate 100% any concern with any mining? No. Whether it's uranium mining, whether it's looking for gold, whether it's looking for any resource that you, I, and everybody else uses in this country, in the world, can you mitigate it 100%? No. Can we mitigate against a car accident happening tonight? No. That's the truth. We can't, 100%. But what we can do is put strong regulations in place to make sure that we do it the best way that we possibly can. And what annoys me about the green movement in this country is they often use mechanisms which undermine their own story. We need the green movement. Don't get me wrong. We need to have a strong lobby group out there that keeps everybody on task. What keeps us to consider what's right and what's wrong. What gets me angry is when you see Green senators light up the Condamine River in Queensland, in your neck of the woods, and say, look at this, fracking's done this. Well, no. I can recall stories when I was a little boy that the Condamine River, through a natural fissure in the earth, released methane, and was bubbling in the Condamine River 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago. Earthquakes and natural occurrence have more of an issue on the world than what we could do or possibly do with fracking in the Northern Territory or in fact anywhere else in the country. But we are talking shale gas, not coal seam gas.
Look, I'm going to be absolutely raked over the coals for not fighting you on this one and giving you a free ride at that. And I should, because I did not come in prepared to talk about fracking at all tonight. We have so many issues, and you have made a case. You have made a case. And I do have many dozens of questions about this, but I think that will be for another time. For now, look, the last couple of weeks, or in fact, the last 3 months, I've been exposed to immigration face-to-face. The Peter Dutton invitation to South Africans has been a huge issue here in Australia. The left have been fighting it tooth and nail as if it was some racist policy. And I wanted to find out what was really going on. And I've spent the best part of the last 3 months giving myself a crash course of a history of a people that goes back to the 16th century, trying to figure out how they got to where they got to. Now,
it's complicated.
It is complicated, but just like safe schools, just like the intersectionality, the identity politics, all of the things driving Australia to hell right now, the Marxism creeping into every institution, through media, through the academy, through education, through every institute, corporate Australia. It really is the same time frame that Marxism entered the political discussion of South Africa. And the things that I've discovered, the same language being used by the Malemas, the ANC, the EFF, from Zuma through to their current president right now, is all Marxist in language. Exactly the same language we are using here. The problem with South Africa is, while we're frogs in hot water, these people here have an extra 40 years on us in terms of their policy. So, for example, and this has been really hard for me, and I'd like your take on it. 40 years ago, the population of blacks and whites in South Africa were about 4 million, I believe it's 4 million whites. 2 million, sorry, forgive me, I'm so tired. I'm just gonna have some caffeine.
Caffeine?
Yeah, so 2 million whites 40 years ago, and 4 million blacks around about. Now, there are 4.5 million whites and over 40 million in their black population.
Right.
Now,
so run that statistic again. So
tenfold increase of the black population, okay? Where, so 2 million to 4 million or 4.5 million in the white population in the last 40 years, and 4 million to over 40 million, okay? Now, the white population would be, if it hadn't been for since 94 and the rainbow policy over there, the Rainbow Nation and the ANC, it would be over 5.5 million, but you have seen people ejecting left, right, and centre, like they did in Rhodesia, like the Rhodesians did in Zimbabwe. You've seen them run for their lives. There's still just over 4.5 million whites left. But if you're looking at the language the government is using and the black population is using, it's extermination. It's not just the expropriation of land without compensation, which is now government policy as of February this year. The language and the tens of thousands of messages that I've seen, the screenshots, the just watching Julius Malema from the EFF talking about essentially calling for the extermination of the white race to take back their country. The Prime Minister over there saying that all of South Africa's problems began when the Boers arrived, and this level of whipping up hatred. There's a very, very short fuse. And that, or let's just not to mix metaphors here, but a switch could flip at any moment. The hatred of the white population over there is terrifying. And as I'm trying to make sense of this and going back and looking at the history, the institutional Marxism, the exact language, my lived experience as a black person, my identity as a black person, all of this stuff is exactly the language we're using in our institutions and across our nation here right now. Now, there could be a white genocide over there at any moment. And that doesn't mesh with our Western mentality. It's very, it's almost impossible to imagine in a Western culture being a white minority in a country. That's a very hard leap to make. But once you realize this is a reality and the Marxism is ready to take over, all the mistakes that we've made together are at the end game in South Africa. You only have to add an extra 30 years to Australia to wonder whether or not our immigration policy, where certain ethnic groups are breeding 5.8 children and we're about 1.8 to 2.2, depending on who you look at, as Westerners, we have to start taking this seriously. Now, South Africa has been a wake-up call. London's already wrecked, you know that. You know, the UK's already wrecked in terms, and Europe as a whole, Italy at the moment is under a lot of pain, and a lot of European countries, because of open borders policies, are gone. Culturally, it's over. Give it another 20 to 40 years, there's nothing left of what we know as England, as we know as Italy. In terms of Australia and this immigration policy, we're being labelled racists and Nazis for suggesting maybe, just maybe, cultures that have shared values, unlike a lot of the South Sudanese population in Melbourne who are forming gangs, and between 7 and 9 break-ins and assaults a night are happening from this near 30,000 group of youngsters. Maybe it might be in our best interest to start considering immigration policies that are more compatible with our culture if we don't want to go the way of South Africa. Do you have a call on this?
Look, Luke, it is such a complicated scenario that we talk about today. But I look at it as a dad. I have children, and I go back to what I said before. I don't have an ego, which is probably not a good thing in politics. But at the end of the day, always put your family and your community first. How's it going to affect the community? Yeah, look, I've got a lot of personal views on certain influence that other cultures can have to our community.
Of course.
Back to what one of your first comments there was about, Minister Dutton.
Yes.
I applaud him for putting his hand out. I mean, first of all, if you're in Australia, if you're a mate, what's the first thing you do? If someone's in trouble, you put your hand out.
Yeah.
Now, I think with all the rhetoric that's been spoken about Minister Dutton and, this is all racist and all this and the other, absolute crap. All right? The guy saw a problem and thought, you know what? As a friend, I'm going to put my hand out.
Mm.
And if we can help in any way, what are you going to do? Would you not do the same for New Zealand? Would you not do the same for any other country that borders? And let's face it, South Africa borders, Australia. They're a neighbour.
Yes.
A fair way away, but they're still a neighbour. You put your hand out and you say, "Can we help?"
Yeah.
And so I applaud him for his, if you like, his view on seeing how Australia might be able to help with that matter. Now, as far as other cultures go, I see the issues that you see on the news every night. France, England, other
Germany.
countries in the world, Germany, that are facing. And I also see pockets within our own country that are facing the same issues. Now I focus back on Darwin in particular. I mean, I live in Palmerston, a suburb. For those that are not sure, Palmerston's about 18 kilometres from the city of Darwin. Darwin is a wonderful melting pot of multiculturalism.
Yes.
One that I think works because of and I know it's been said before, but the salt and pepper aspect that we have to the community. You don't have pockets of a community where you've got predominantly one nation, whether it's Greeks, whether it's Italians, whether it's New Zealanders, whether it's those from a Muslim faith, for instance, all in one suburb.
Yes.
And I think the only way that multiculturalism can work anywhere in the world is to follow, if you like, the blueprint that's here in Darwin, where we've got this melting pot of cultures. Because if you allow one particular culture to overtake another, you're going to have problems. If you allow,
it is interesting because there is this word. What do you mean as multicultural?
Look at Western Sydney.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look at Western Sydney. Look at Melbourne.
Right.
What you mean by multiculturalism, and what the universities and the cultural Marxists mean as multiculturalism are two very different things. And Mark Latham tries very hard to distinguish between those two things, but same word can mean two completely different things. Obviously,
you're absolutely right. And what I'm suggesting is that if you've got a mix of everybody, where no one else has an ultimate power, then you've got a system that would likely work. The moment that one particular culture has more power over another, you've got real problems. Now, my own dad, we've sat down, Sir Dad, we've sat down and talked about this quite often. You can imagine if all of a sudden you've got, even at the local government level, where you've got in this country the ability to make laws, bylaws. Now, they're still laws to control or to manage a community. If you've got even a local government area that is overtaken by a particular race or faith, then they have the power to make laws for that particular jurisdiction. That's when this country has got some real issues. Dad and I have spoken about this many times, where he worries that the time will come where particular local government areas, councils, will be overtaken by a particular race and then have the power to influence change, the power to influence laws, and then all of a sudden you've got real issues that affect everybody in the community that, are all directed to supporting that particular race or that particular faith. That's wrong. And that's what ultimately will happen here in Australia. Ultimately has happened in the UK, France, Germany.
That's right.
And
Sadiq Khan himself. I mean, he's out there as a proud, I would say a proud Muslim. I have many Muslim friends that aren't like this guy.
As do I.
He marches, absolutely, but he marches with the anti-Israel groups. He marches with Hezbollah. He marches with al-Nusra. He marches out there while saying that terrorism in the 21st century is just a way of life that we have to expect. This is not a good thing. And we're seeing it happen more and more and more. One of the most eye-opening things to me, because we need to talk solutions here, but one of the most eye-opening things to me was watching, this is going to be blasphemous to half the audience, but the Vladimir Putin interviews with Roger Stone that were done over a couple of years. And
yes.
Did you get to see those?
Yes.
Brilliant. Brilliant insight into this man's life and the way he sees his country. And you had Oliver Stone basically saying, look, the thing that doesn't make sense to me as a Westerner is seeing some of the world's most beautiful mosques synagogues and Russian Orthodox churches side by side with no violence, no crime, and no hate crimes against each other. He said, how is this possible in a country this large? And he said, because they're Russians first. They grew up together. He said, what you have in your countries is a problem with first and second generation immigration. These people are not immigrants. There's a huge difference when they're Russians first. Now, when I was a child, and when you were a child as well, the thickest accent, Mediterranean, Moroccan, it didn't matter. You asked where they're from, and they said Australia. Proudly, they're Australians. No matter what the accent was, they're Australians. Now we have this culture in the last decade of, I'm Sudanese Australian, or I am Lebanese Australian. And there's been a diminishing of our culture, which took a long time to get through. Common law, the Magna Carta, the values of property rights and rights for women. And it took a long time to evolve. And it's not a perfect system, but it's an evolved system that has taken blood.
And you're right.
Sweat and tears.
It's not a perfect system.
Yeah, but where we're going.
It's not a perfect system, but it's an evolving system that's trying to find improvement. It's trying to find an improvement for the way our society works. It's not about cutting people's heads off. It's not about
throwing
going
gays off
backwards.
buildings and burning women.
Yes,
that's right.
It's about being progressive in how we can make it. And go back, Luke. Go back to this again. You're a dad. You've got children. You want to leave this place better than you found it.
Amen.
And unless people have that attitude in life, then you're doing it wrong, right? I want to leave this place better for my own children, for my grandchildren, one day when I'm a granddad. I want to leave this place better than I found it. If you think that you, through ideology, through faith, that you're going to achieve this by terrorism and cutting people's heads off, you're wrong. I'm sorry, but they are my views. You are wrong.
Okay, so when
I love my
80% of British Muslims want homosexuality penalised, okay, as of last poll, that adulterers should be stoned was nearly 4 out of 5. Okay, British Muslims who grew up there from Pakistan, and we're not talking about immigrants here. When you're talking about ideas where, like this, very regressive ideas, in a sense, entering the common parlance of a Western culture, it's only a generation or two away from beyond critical mass, and this becomes a new normal. We're between 1,200 and 1,500 years worth of fighting to get to where we got to in the West, okay? A lot of these cultures are still stuck in the 12th century, and the ideologies of their belief of women's rights. That's a big one. And why third and fourth wave feminists aren't screaming about genital mutilation and the treatment of women in Islam. In the UK, it has just taken over. Saudi is the acid attack capital of the world, for goodness sake. The UK. But
Luke,
how do we uphold our values?
Well, the question I often ask is that if you have a look at some of the videos of many Middle Eastern cities back in the 50s and 60s, you will see a very progressive society. You'll have, and call it Americanism if you like, but you will see green centres of town and palm trees, and you'll see American cars, and you'll see ladies in short skirts. You'll see very much a mirror of what was happening in Western society. And then today
in Iran,
go to the same places.
Yeah, exactly.
And we'll see, ladies wearing burqas, and it's as if society has regressed. It hasn't advanced; it's regressed. And
but it's regressed to its purest form. Like I'm on the 17th of May will be my first day with Imam Tawhidi, and you'll know who he is. You've probably seen him on Bolt and others.
Yeah,
he's got more fatwas out on him than I don't know who. Right, in this country as well, because he dares to suggest that maybe Islam needs a reformation. But what we're seeing is he's very pragmatic. If you watch a few of his interviews, he's saying we're not going to reform it in a generation or two. We've got some serious things to look out for in the meantime. And in the meantime, pragmatically, we really need to seriously consider ideas like critical mass, ideas like grouping people together in suburbs and not integrating them into society ad nauseum. You're right. You go back to Iran pre the Ayatollah, pre the civil war over there. Goodness, pre the revolution. Let's call it the revolution. That's what they like. This was a whole different society. But Islam in its purest form has regressed to the 12th century. Okay. And female genital mutilation, over 95, 96% of it happens in Muslim majority countries. You can argue culture or religion as much as you want, but there are things like this, acid attacks, throwing gays off buildings, stoning for adultery, ad nauseum, that are very uniquely Islamic in a sense. We've got other problems too, but we do have a very, very pernicious one when the birth rate is 5.8 and we are less than 2 in a sense. It's by the time my daughter is my age, the whole table will be flipped. The whole table will be flipped. So talking solutions, obviously at this point, we're very, very close to critical mass. We may or may not be able to stem the tide of immigration in a sense, but law and order must be key, surely. Where do the values for law and order come from?
Let's start with law and order. First of all, people like yourself and others should not be at risk of speaking like you are at the moment, like I am at the moment. Because I worry that laws in this country will get to the point where you and I can't have a conversation like this without, you know what, within minutes from now, and I mean minutes, with technology today, there's going to be a knock at the front door and we're going to be arrested because we speak about what we believe in. And and this is what gets me angry. What is it about the world today where what I might think is somehow at a different level, lower, or that's wrong, and someone else's level is right? You and I, as you said earlier in this interview, we don't always agree on things. You know, I think you're a fliphead in some ideals, but that's great. Yeah. And you know what? I respect that. I absolutely respect that. You might think that I'm an old fuddy-duddy in some of my ideals, but you know what? I hope that you respect that. But the problem is that we are at a very crucial point in our society, in our community, that we start to introduce Marxist, leftist laws into this country, where you and I can't have a conversation without the fear of persecution.
We already have a weaponized human rights commission, and it's at any moment that thing could be used to its fullest extent.
Was that a knock at the door? You're right, but the point is that we've got to be very careful with how we, as a society, allow the evolution of laws that get to the point where free speech, and let's face it, free speech has been something that the left have looked at for so long as they own free speech. They did.
They were the defenders of it for a long time.
Absolutely. But now it appears that no, unless I or you or others see it their way, we're the enemy.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And that's the word, the enemy. We have become the enemy of the left view in society. Now, I think a pure society, one that's going to be progressive and to move forward, you don't always have to agree with someone, but don't make it illegal for them to have that view.
Oh, look, absolutely.
We've always had different views on different things about life, about society, about our communities.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, stand by what you believe in,
Mm-hmm.
but for God's sake, don't make it a crime to have a view about something.
Yes. Oh, look, I totally agree. Now, look, there's a couple of comments here. You know, of this interview being a good idea. A political operative here saying, "Well done. Others need to take note of this." Actually, because this was one of the points. There's a woman here who was very, very, very deeply invested in One Nation, and I won't say how deeply at the moment. She's outed herself anyway. I've always seen the idea of a few other political parties holding the others to account as a good idea. I'm torn. I'm torn down the middle at this moment, because the Conservatives, the Liberal National Coalition, it's a mess. Okay, men like Barnaby, Christensen, real conservatives inside the otherwise Conservative Party until very recent history, almost the minority. Turnbull and Shorten, if you ask most Australians, are 15% apart in the way they would run the country. You know, given if they're allowed to be dictator and not have to pay any obeisance to their own party. Now, what is the political solution to the future? It's become a very trendy thing. Look, I respect Bernardi's decision to do what he did. The numbers aren't working out for him just yet. You've got groups like Lionhelm's group. You've got senators from Pauline Hanson through to Darren Hinch. You've got such a, I won't say chaotic, that's not the right word, a diverse, is that a good word?
But the question, Luke, the question here is, why has Pauline, why has Darren, and I've got all respect for Darren, why has Darren, why has Corey and others become a voice when historically in this country we've had a left and a right, Labor and a Liberal, monopoly, if you like, in this country. Why have these people become why have these people got a voice in the first place? And it's because people become disenfranchised with the left view and the right view. I thought Tony Abbott was a terrific guy. Didn't agree with everything that he said, and I thought, you know what, Malcolm Turnbull might make a difference in this country. And maybe he's that kind of person that could, bring together all sides of politics. And to be honest, I've been disappointed with Malcolm's ability to do just that. And don't get me wrong, I think he's got some fabulous ministers. I think that the Conservative government is still the best way to lead this country. On the other hand, you've got the likes of Labor. Sorry, they just don't have what it takes to run a business, and that's what this country is. It is a business. It's a business. You've got to look at what your income is. You've got to look at what your expenditure is, and you've got to manage it. And I don't think Labor governments historically have been able to do that.
No,
it's the same.
That's right. But we're at this is a cultural war as well. And that, as much as economics, probably more so now than in my lifetime, people actually give a damn about the culture that they actually have and what they're able to do.
They give a damn about culture, Luke. But the sad thing is in this country that whether you like it or not, there's
you've got to pay for culture. Yeah.
But no. But there's a lot of friends out there in the media, and they're probably not going to like to listen to this. But you know what? The media is very, very, very heavily weighted towards the left. And,
absolutely.
Our community is left with making a decision. And we are as humanity, as a person, we are, if you like, we're made up of who we believe or what we think. And what we think is often determined on what we see every night on the news. And if that news is of a left bias, then of course we're going to be of a left bias. Now, whether you like it or not, have a look at ABC. Have a look at.
Oh, I've done this, and all my listeners have done this. Look,
but what I'm saying, Luke, is that often things that I've watched I've watched you, the heterodox, and other things talk about.
Yeah.
I often bring it back to my world for a second. Someone that who's door knocked many suburbs across the Northern Territory, knocked on people's doors and talked to people face to face. Do they care what happens in Syria? As much as it's important, no. Do they care what's happening in South Africa? No. They care about what's happening in their own community. They're caring about their local council filling the pothole in the street outside their house. And as sad as this is, the average person in this country is so removed from what's happening in the world, is sad. It really is sad. And how you as a politician, how you as a member of the community try to impart some of that. Did you know this is happening over there? No, I didn't, and I don't care. But can you fix this pothole up in the street outside? And that's as basic as it is. And I enjoy listening to the conversations that you guys have on this medium. I absolutely. But can I talk about what you're talking about to the average person? Sometimes no, because you know what? It's the wrong word, I know, but it's above them. It's outside the realm of what's going on in the community. How can we as a conservative, if you like, proportion of our society, how can we get back to the average person in this community and say, you know what, some of these things really need to be paid attention to? And how can we start to develop policies that are going to help, whether it's at the local government level, at the state government level, at the federal level, start to assist this country in going forward. And until we can, we're in a void. We really are in a void.
Mate, look, I agree. With my studies in journalism, I've discovered, over the last decade, there's a huge gulf between media and journalism. And I've come to a working hypothesis that it's much like the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Mainstream media, let's just say some knowledge is too much for us. It's too big for us. It's too lofty for us. And an earthquake that kills 8,000 people in China and a girl gang raped on a train in India, making our 5 o'clock news, where we can affect zero change, but all that story does is heighten anxiety, suspicion amongst our own communities and all, is not good for us. We can't, unless we're sending it to an NGO where, the money's getting to that person. Unless we're sending it to a charity, there's very little effect that we can personally have on the lives of all of these people around the world. I understand that.
I get the nail on the head.
People don't even know their neighbors. They look at the world through their plasma screen or their LCD screen. That's the new black, right? And that's their window into the world. They don't know the neighbor to their left. They don't know the neighbor to their right in most suburban Australia now. That is an absolute tragedy. And there are so many stories that I've caught out over the last, Syria is a big one, but a lot of stories where you basically, you're watching the news stories, you're watching the package come through, and you start getting suspicious. You go, is that so? Just because I've been told that.
Yeah, but you do, Luke, because you're a smart person. The average punter agrees with everything that they see, read in the paper every day or see on the news every night as verbatim. Because like you, I was brought up in a society that thought, the news is something you can trust. What they display is the truth. What I've learned in 8 years in politics is the fact that, and this is based on what I've sat down and I've seen news reports of my own interviews, which could last 20 or 30 minutes. And there could be 100 questions asked during that interview. And then I've watched both the major networks and I've watched the ABC present two completely different stories on an interview that I've given. So I come to realise very quickly that all the media do is take, if you like, a couple of seconds from that interview to suit their narrative.
We're back to
It's not,
clickbait. It's clickbait, and that's all it is.
it's,
And yeah,
it's not about the truth or about the story. It's about, and look, my fault, if anything, as a minister, was probably the fact that my interviews went too long and I told them too much information. But the reality is I wanted to give them context.
who
I
needs
wanted to give
WikiLeaks when you've got Pete?
context. Yeah. On why a decision was made or whatever it was. But at the end of the day, I never liked to think that the truth was going to matter. The truth was the truth.
Yeah.
Tell it as it is. You know, if it was bad, it's going to be bad. If it's good, it's going to be good.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when you could sit down and watch commercial networks and you could watch the ABC, my favourite. No, that's wrong.
And I'm going to clip that out, and that's going to be a 5-second grab from now on.
But the truth is that if you could be involved in an interview for up to 30 minutes with journalists, and see what's written in the paper the next day, what's seen on commercial TV that night, what's seen on ABC TV that night, and think there's 3 completely different stories. I then understood very early in the picture that the media control the perception in the community.
Well, yeah, and we willingly do it. I mean, we've become a generation now where everything's clickbait, everything's Insta fame, from Instagram through to Facebook. People, the studies are clear from MIT.
It's the microwave society.
Yeah, the University of Toronto put out incredible studies, like behavioral psychological studies, on just the effect that the dopamine hit of likes on a teenager's phone, how that rewires their brain for instant gratification, how social media has transformed and absolutely decimated relationships between people. That MIT, Sherry Turkle talks about these things here, that the conversation we had 10 years ago and the conversation we're having today is far diminished, because up to 27% of our subconscious is anticipating, whether we know it or not, because it's subconscious, a call or a message on this thing. We are in a drastically different culture, and the news has played that game. Now, the problem is politicians have been playing that game as well. The reason the left have been so much better at it, apart from being, well, La Trobe University since the 60s, have been heavily socialist and Marxist in their ideas. So they've had a revolving door mechanism through media to, an argument has been made very, very strongly that a huge proportion of the media is left. Why? Because of the activism that happens on campus, through union movements, through NGOs, through politics, back through the universities. Now, this is something conservatives haven't been good at. They haven't been good at selling their message.
It's not wrong. It's just their view.
Well, and I would say Marxism is wrong. Yeah.
Well, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. But what
I'm just going to take that grab as well. On that, just before.
No. You should use that. You should use it. But what I'm saying is that we would never, as a conservative, if you like, a conservative person, I'm not going to criticize someone for having that view.
Yeah.
I may think that they are wrong or different to my views, but I'm not going to criticize them for it. What I'm going to do is try to educate them and explain to them
off a building. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, that's the difference between, if you like, the left and the right in this country.
Yeah.
Where often you look at Barnaby. No, it's not. But look at Barnaby Joyce. Yes. Terrific guy. All right. Yes. Look at. But listen to this. In a conservative side of politics, we applaud people for their thinking. Mm-hmm. We applaud people because they are willing to speak out. Now, Corey Bernardi got to the point where, he had to leave the party because of his views. Now, good on him. Absolutely good on him for having the conviction to do that. Yeah. But that's the side of that's the side that I absolutely love, that someone can have differences of opinions. Yeah. And not be criticised for it. On the left side of policies, on the left side of politics, the moment you step out of line, you're going to be cut.
Well, it's like Christina Hoff Summers or Germaine Greer or like the feminist pillars of the past being absolutely cut off now. They're pariahs now because they happen to express.
Because you've stepped outside the party line.
Polite society. They're gone. They're gone.
I can recall a conversation a quick conversation I had with the Chief Minister in the Northern Territory, Michael Gunner. This is a dinner a while back, and I said, "Oh, Michael," I went up and I shook his hand. The one thing that you've done, Michael, that you should be proud of is the fact that you've kept your team together.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's strong in the left side of politics. They're very strong when it comes to a team, whereas the conservative side of politics, you know what, we actually, if you like, develop on the fact of new ideas, on not being afraid to step out and to say what is right.
That is a very interesting point, because I have had countless people come of late, and a couple of marquee ones, that make me highly suspicious, who are wanting to unite conservatives all over the country in some sort of renaissance. Now, I get it. On one hand, that would be a desire, that would be a goal. But the difference between conservatives, the conservative, libertarian, classical liberal types, and the left or leftists.
We applaud thinking.
Yeah, one. But two, we're not collectivists by nature. We are highly suspicious of another slogan, another lie, and we become even more so. Any baby boomer now who have seen their party, whether they voted Labor or Liberal, they look at the current situation, or any Gen Z, my generation screwed, but any Gen Z through to anybody 50 plus right now are deeply suspicious of the systemic nature of the team sport, in spite of the truth. They're deeply suspicious of media.
Now, I know this is a bad analogy, but think sheep.
Yeah.
Sheep following a direction.
Yeah.
There's the other side. Think chickens. You ever tried to herd chickens?
No. I had
Chickens
a Jack Russell who knew how to, but yes.
Yeah. Well, chickens are like the conservative side of politics, right?
Yeah.
They're all over the place.
Yeah.
Right. Free thinkers, thinking about better ways of doing things, usually business-orientated people that are progressive, that want to advance society, and then think of the sheep. So think of the left as the sheep and the right as the chickens. Right? Bad analogy, but one, very hard to herd. The others,
and it's the total opposite of the labels given to both.
Yeah. So don't take this to say that I think that Bill Shorten is is maybe a kelpie, but he's good at keeping his herd in check. Yes. Where the conservative side of politics is, it's open. It's what
like
most.
Though he's got dossiers on everybody this thick, like what they ate for breakfast. There's a reason,
and probably me too.
That's right. That's right. Now, I was going to say, look, there was one great comment. We've got to wrap this up for everybody watching. Louis Volvola said, the only way a Labor MP could run a small business is if it started as a big business. I like that one.
Yeah, but it became a small business very soon after.
That was the point, yes. The only way he could run a small business is if it started as a big business, yes.
Yes. And that was my whole philosophy in government. And for those that are listening out there, I wanted to see how government could leverage business.
Yes.
I've got not an issue to sign off on a policy or a paper that was going to use public money. Let's just talk about, let's say that I was about to sign off on $10 million worth of public money. And the big picture, that's not a lot of money, but $10 million, in my world, that's a lot of money. But $10 million, and if it was going to leverage,
if
it was going to leverage $300 million of private money into your community, then that's a good thing.
Yes.
Right? Versus the left view might be that, no, we need to spend $300 million of public money to do the same thing. No. Government should be small. Government should be, and in fact, if I ever got back into government in the Northern Territory, my mantra would be growing the public service. growing the public service. I know that's different, but you
A
know
little
why?
bit.
Because I know that the territory is going to prosper so much, and we're going to grow the population in the Northern Territory that we're going to need a bigger public service.
Okay.
So the
I'd
public
love
service
you
is
to add
going to
that
grow.
sometime. Yes.
Because we're going to have vision, we're going to bring people with us, and we're going to make the Northern Territory a place people,
Great again.
even you in Queensland, Luke, you might come to want to live in the Northern Territory because we're going to make this place so great.
So great.
Sounds like Donald Trump. But
that's okay. For half my viewers, that's a really good thing. For the other half, it's really bad.
But the truth is, unless as a leader, unless you, one, have a vision and you can bring people with you, then give it up. Just walk away.
Okay, so this is the thing that I will wrap up on here is we're talking about the Insta fame, and this is really important for me to get your take on this, not knowing the answer. Because of the Insta fame, because the politicians have been following a corrupt media, not journalists, for close to 15, 16 years now, not realizing that the viewership of these things, so quick analogy, you've heard it before, but during Walter Cronkite to Dan Rather, when the US was around 242 million, okay, 4 out of 5 people tuned in every night to watch the reports during Vietnam and the like. 4 out of 5 Americans tuned in. Okay, the highest ranking news anchor in the United States today pulls between 5 and 6 million people a night in a country of 340 million people. All right, that is huge. That is massive. People's news consumption is in their own hands now. Sadly, a lot of it's relegated to the echo chamber of their own social media. But for a lot of people, Australia's a long way behind the 8 ball on this. Alternative media, alternative sources, actually journalists who've left mainstream networks to form their own news organizations, be it Michael Drudge or others, they actually go elsewhere to form their own opinions. Okay, collectivists really hate this. Globalists really hate this. But look, we're getting back to the fame thing. The politicians in Australia who've been chasing this, and the Conservatives are playing catch up at way too late on this to try and play the media's game.
We're not good enough. We're not good enough in that space.
Yeah, but you don't need to be. Bob and Robbie Katter are highly unlikely to be voted out of their electorates. Why? Because they don't give a stuff about the rest of Australia, except for, Cap, which was a slight error on his behalf. He's been really good for his electorate for a long time. It doesn't matter about the rest of Australia. He'll look after his. Bernardi, I would be very sad if he's taken out of New England without the hiccup of Vicky and all of that sort of stuff. The reality is his people have always loved him. And that's all that matters. People representing their electorates, right? And not trying to jet set around the world all day, every day, like Kevin 07, Kevin 747 was it, and try and solve the world's problems all day, every day, rather than being where their electorate is. Now, my question to you is, as the political landscape has gotten more fractious, you have, and I know, looking at you and other friends in politics, what it has taken, the sacrifices they've had to make working 25/8 to make a difference for, what relationship management's like. You can barely have 800 people in your life and keep tabs on them, let alone an electorate of maybe 40,000 people. What are we going to do here? What is the steps for these people who are they're becoming independent senators, they're starting micro parties, they're going out there, out of their way, and in a sense, confusing Australians. And I say this with a lot of pain in my heart saying this. What advice do you have for these people, if not to draw them back to a major party where they've got some power and influence, or infiltrate and change the nature of the party if they don't like one of the two majors? What would you be advising people who are aspiring to a political career right now in this landscape today?
Don't do it. Look, the truth is, I think it's going to take.
great.
No, I think it's going to take not one level of attack. It's going to take two levels of attack.
Okay.
It's going to take, if you look at people like yourself, the heterodox and other mediums to make a real difference at a different level that's not getting through to mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
But at the other end, it's going to take people like yourself to talk to people like Mr. Bolt, and you need to be on Sky. But people like yourself with your thinking and more conservative thinkers need to infiltrate the media, the mainstream media. And so I can see you on a night. I mean, I look at someone like who was a former, advisor to the former Prime Minister. Now, most nights on Sky News.
It's
fantastic.
Yeah. Look,
Miss Credlin does a fantastic job. And in fact, I could tell you a story where my wife, myself, Peter, and Tony shared a lift in Alice Springs going up. But that's another night, right? We'll talk about that. But the point being,
I have heard that one, and it's a good one.
Yeah. So the point being is that it's going to take more than just one level
absolutely
of media to infiltrate, to make a difference to mainstream. And what I'm talking about mainstream is that the everyday punter out there. And I said earlier on in this interview, the average person don't care too much about what's happening over there. What they do care about is the pothole in the street outside. I know that sounds like crass grassroots politics, but it's the truth. No one really cares about what goes on outside the boundaries of their four walls. And nobody cares about what goes on beyond their suburb or elsewhere. So what happens is that politicians and, of course, prospective new politicians need to understand that there is really two worlds out there. There's one, what happens in suburbia, and what happens in the real world, and how to bring together, if you like, those two worlds. How to bring together without being, if you like, cynical, without being, in any way, sound like that you're talking crap, talking shit. Am I allowed to say shit on this place?
Yes.
Can I say shit?
We're still in Australia. That's right.
Right. So you know what? Because most people very quickly will look at you, Luke, and they'll look at me and they'll go, "You're talking shit." Right? It doesn't matter to me. How are you going to help? Right? How's it going to help me today? How's it going to help me tomorrow? You and I and a lot of free thinkers out there also know that what's happening in the real world is going to have an impact on this place in the future. We've talked about it tonight. It's going to have an impact on this place.
Yes.
But if it is too far removed from the pothole in the street outside my house today, how do you bridge the gap? How do you bridge the difference? And so from my point of view, it's going to take people like you. It's going to take people like Bolt and others and Paul Murray, who I think are conservative thinkers in this world, to really start to hit home to mainstream. Because if you leave it up to today's standard media, it ain't going to happen.
No, it's not going to happen. We are sadly the aberration now. Those of us who
are we a minority group?
We are a minority group, increasingly so.
Well, there is a future.
We're privileged white males. Remember that. So essentially, without giving a qualitative statement to you, asking you for a qualitative statement, the Viktor Orbáns, the Hungary, the Polands, the Brexit movement, things like that. Like, I love Nigel Farage. Like, it's great. But these people have been resonating with much to the disgust of the globalists. They've been resonating with a lot of people because they're bringing the message home. And I think Australians, in a sense, our manufacturing is not good. Our economy is getting worse as it gets driven deeper into debt. Our trade deals are woeful. Bringing it home to the electorate, bringing it home to Australia, and upholding what has made Australia great in the past while seeking a way to improve it into the future is the only message that we can possibly expect to sell. Everything else.
But Luke, our very unions that are supposed to stand up for Australians, stand up for you and I and everybody else, have let us down miserably. It's become about the movement rather than trying to make it to a worker. I mean, I look at this and think, you know what? Look at Israel at the moment. Look at the way that they look at defence and as an opportunity for that country to provide products for the rest of the world. They have a bit of an 80-20 rule that, you know, 20% of what defence industries does in Israel, 20% goes to Israel. 80% goes to around the world. Yet in Australia, we are left with this kind of, mendicant state again. Okay, I can build 12 subs for you. Why aren't you building 24 subs? Why aren't you selling another 12 to the wider world? Why aren't we looking at the ability of this country to not only man up, but continue to man up, rather than this up and down cycle that we have in this country? Why didn't the Australian government talk to Toyota or Ford or anybody else and say, let's not close down our manufacturing industry. Let's start to make jeeps. Let's start to make tanks. Let's start to make other things. And now I know I'm talking defence, but we've got industries in this country, industries that could have very easily transferred their technology into building cars, which are no longer economically available. Economically viable for that business. But let's start to make things that are. But not just for the Australian Defence Force. Why couldn't we be making an APC that's not suitable just for Australia, but for South Africa or for America or for any other country in the world? Stop looking at the Australian government as just, we're going to build 12 subs. No, we're not. We're going to build 30 subs, 40 subs, or 50 subs, but for a world market. And so we.
And again, it's the same with minerals. It's the same with resources. The same with, you know, oil and gas and everything.
Don't get me on fracking.
No, I'm not going to get you on fracking again because I'm already in trouble for that one. But to be the food bowl for half the world would be a 20-year job. You know, again, you're right.
And what does it provide? It provides jobs for real people like you and me and others in the community. Long-term futures that are sustainable because we don't have this small outlook on life. We have this big impact or this big outlook on life. It's the rest of the world we're competing with, not just here in Australia.
Yes. Well, Pete, the level of passion I've heard in your voice tonight definitely shows that you're pretty well ready for another run. There's a saying in journalism, and we're not talking about media, journalism will kill you, but it'll keep you alive while you're doing it. And I think that's much the same as the other side of the coin, which is politics. I think there's a lot that you've got to offer, and I would like to think that if your darling wife allows you, and your kids are all, you know, grown up and big now, I think you really, really, really are one of the few people that I think should be having a run from a major perspective, in terms of trade, in terms of bringing jobs back, in terms of creating industries and manufacturing where you can. Australia needs men of integrity, whether it be Corey Bernardi, whether it be Peter Chandler, whether it be, you know, because the system that's played out the last 15 years has fallen on its head and it's not coming back. The trust in the American media after the Trump election fell to 8%. Right. And the trust in the average Australian politician, American politician, the numbers are easier. The Australian politician have slumped double figures in the last half decade alone. This is not a good sign. So we need an injection of adrenaline and passion and fire and passion for our country and our culture. And yeah.
And look, I know you want to finish this, but let me explain one thing.
Yeah.
When you think of politicians in this country, what I've learnt after 8 years in the game is that, what's a good analogy? Think of a chessboard.
Mm-hmm.
The politicians are the pawns.
Yes.
and think of every level up a game of chess and the people. And the fact is, at the end of the day, politicians become the pawns in a bigger man's game or a bigger person's game.
Yes.
And so, whilst often politicians are at the blame of what often goes on, and in some cases they should be,
Yes.
what goes on behind the scenes, what goes on in the business world, what goes on well above your pay rate, my pay rate, and even those of politicians.
Mm-hmm.
They are the real power in what goes on in the world. And we are just a pawn in another person's game.
Yes. And that that will make you a much better politician than a first-time duly elected.
Only because I'm willing to call it out.
And that's right. And continue to call it out, even when you're in power and there are interests around you that could do away with you. They're big business. There's a lot of money in energy and pharmaceuticals and trade deals and all the rest. We know that. But there are countries that are defying all of this right now. As we speak, there are countries, 4 of them, that I know about who have overthrown the shackles of shitty trade deals that have not been good for their people, virtual Versailles agreements, on their trade, their exports, tariffs, and all of that, and gone back to protecting their country first. And as a child of the 80s, this is so against the grain of anybody before me. That's great. That's wonderful. Australians are Australians and proud to be so. Americans are Americans and proud to be so. Now we all have this guilt and self-doubt about who we are.
But Luke, stop for 1 second. Stop for 1 second.
Shut up, Luke.
If my father made a mistake, and I'm sure he has, right, should I be to blame?
I've never seen any. Yeah.
That's
right.
If my grandfather had made a mistake, is it my shame? Is it my responsibility? If I can make my world a better place than what it is today, that's my only responsibility. And you, as a dad, myself as a father, if we can make this place a better place, that's all we need to do. Forget about the rest. Let's just do what we can do in our own patch to make this a better place. But forget with the guilt. Australians should be proud of who they are.
Yes.
Have we made mistakes in the past? Absolutely. There's been some horrific things that have happened in the history of this country, as there have been in countries around the world. But you and I today, are we responsible for that? No, we're not. What we are responsible for is what we do today, what we do tomorrow. And if we can make this place a better place, that's our job. And let's get on with it.
Amen. And look, final closing thing on that, you've probably seen Dr. Jordan Peterson and what he's been doing around the world. To see him on, I think it was Neil Mitchell, was almost too hard. Where he started crying when he had some meth addicts come up to him, and other people come up to him and said they've changed their life, they've got better jobs, because they've cleaned their room, they're standing with their shoulders back, they're taking on their responsibility. And I think it was Neil. He said, "You're taking this very personally, aren't you?" As he started welling up, and he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Why?" Neil asked why. He said, because it took so little encouragement to change their lives. It took so little. You would have thought that it would have taken a lot more, but it took so little for them to turn their lives around. And I think that goes, what is this country except a collection of 24 million lives, to inspire people that they have what it takes right now to lift something heavy and carry it for the sake of their family and for the sake of their country, to stand up straight with your shoulders back and face it, regardless of the past, regardless of our mistakes that don't define us, and just get about doing it, mate. That's why I'm here committing career suicide in music. That's why you're here not caring at all, because if you are to stand at another election, you're not going to be saying anything different. And I hope our listeners tonight, there are a few comments that I didn't get through, but I will respond to them, and you're welcome to as well. I really hope that that people take this encouragement to heart, because we do have what it takes to turn this ship around and do something wonderful for the sake of our children and grandchildren.
Yeah, I mean, and we have the ability in each of us to make this place a better world.
Amen.
But that is a responsibility. And at the end of the day, do you want to leave the place a better place? That's the choice. That's the choice that we all have.
Yeah.
And I hope that the most people are listening in tonight and may listen in the future is share that view that we want to leave this place a better place. But it takes courage, it takes conviction, it takes the ability to know what doors to walk through,
Yeah.
and to ensure when you walk through those doors that you have the, I suppose, the right aptitude to bring people with you and to want to make a change. But I thoroughly believe that we have a beautiful world. We absolutely have a beautiful world. But we can't allow factions in this world to take over, no matter whether you're from the left view or the right view.
Mm-hmm.
You can't allow faiths, you can't allow factions to take over this world. Mate, I love you.
Love you too,
We'll
Pete.
speak soon.
Take care.
And,
you have a great night.
Yeah, and you know what? I'll tell you a story off air. I think your dad drank too much the other night. No, he didn't.
No,
he didn't.
He would not have.
He actually drank less than I did. But we had a wonderful time in Melbourne. And again, another opportunity. And to think that we're not all rightards. What an amazing event we turned up to last week in Melbourne, where there was a melding of both a Moroccan and an Australian culture within one, and one that demonstrated again that it can work, but it's got to be done in a constructive manner. It's got to be done, if you like, in a regulated manner, and that gets back to, immigration. This has got to be done in a way that the country can manage multiculturalism, not allowing it to take control of itself. Because if we do that, we lose control of this country, as have, like you said earlier, countries like Germany, France, England, probably lost part of what was once their culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
God bless. God bless.
Have a good night. Thank you so much. And let's wrap this up. Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in again. And Pete, so much fun. Everyone's going to want to see you back. If nothing else, than to ask what the hell that background's about. But do not. Do not get high and tune in to Pete next time. Good night, everybody. Thank you so much.